For this year's C-SPAN Studentcam documentary, we were given the question, what's the issue you most want candidates to discuss during the 2016 presidential campaign? And in our group, we chose something that affected us, higher education, specifically tuition and costs. According to the College Board, a public four-year in-state college fees and living expenses in 1971 cost $8,239 on average. In 2015, this cost $19,548, obviously a big difference. C-SPAN talks about the net price of college rising.
What students actually pay, which is what most of us are concerned about, the net price, the net tuition, actually rose more than that, and rose for the first time in quite a while. And that's because the amount of financial aid, the grant aid from the federal government, which had been really sharply increasing from in the late 2000s, actually started dropping the last couple of years.
To find out more about this, we visited our local Sacramento State University and talked to its president. He talked to us about the change in college costs and why it's happened.
It is dramatically changed. The entire California State University system is receiving $1 billion less than it was receiving just in 2009. We used to receive about 70% of our funds from the state. We now receive 46% of our funds. So of the $285 million that we have as our budget, 46% is coming from the state. The rest is on the backs of the students with tuition and fees.
But it's not just a problem where we live. It's a problem all over the country.
It's a nationwide problem. Let's take, for example, Wisconsin. Wisconsin is down to 11% that is coming. So all of that is coming on the backs of the students. Louisiana is the worst of all. It's between 6 and 7%.
Parents have around 17 to 18 years to save up for a student's college tuition, which seems like it is enough to completely pay for college. But to find out more about the burden on parents, we interviewed the mother of a student who is planning on going to college in fall of 2016.
I think that from the time a baby is born, every parent begins to think about how they're going to finance their child's college education. In our case, we have one child, and you would think, oh, that's a lot less money. But the colleges for the career of his choice are very limited, and they are very expensive. The room and board and the tuition together averages about $60,000 to $75,000 a year. I don't know many families who can afford $300,000 to $400,000 for a college education.
This, of course, is not always the case. Thousands of students attend public colleges that are partially funded by the state and are cheaper. A current student at the University of California, Los Angeles, also gives us his perspective.
FAFSA is an important first step to paying for college for me. Filling out that application, saying what aid I can get from the federal government, and then moving on straight to loans and university grants. UCLA does provide me some financial aid through different grants based on financial need and academics. And after that, it's all loans. I've taken out a lot of federal loans, but I've also taken out a lot of private loans as well. I've taken out probably around $30,000 in loans just for my first 2 years of college, which is very high.
Nearly every single student needs financial aid. Most importantly, the FAFSA, which stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's the application that determines a student's eligibility for financial aid from the federal government. It mainly rests on how much your parents' income is. From this information, they give out money to students based on need. It's one of the main ways the government helps students to go to college, but for many, it doesn't give enough.
Through just accepting income as information and then family size and other factors, it's very limited in what the FAFSA expects or the federal government expects people to pay.
Along with the FAFSA, there's also federal or state grants.
The Pell Grant has become increasingly important. The Pell Grant is for people who are at poverty level. Over 51% of our students at Sacramento State receive the Pell Grants. One of the nice things that's here in California is a Cal Grant, so California Grant, and 70% of all students who come to Sac State receive some sort of of either federal or state aid or scholarships.
However, despite this, people think something needs to change. We asked people about FAFSA and financial aid, and if and what they think about needs to change.
I do think that if the FAFSA was changed a little bit and updated to consider some of these things, because honestly, students going into college don't really have their own financial backing when they enter. And they're very reliant on their parents, but when you're not reliant on your parents at the same time, it's really, really hard to cover the cost of college without taking out lots of loans and without putting yourself in a lot of debt, which will set you back pretty far when it comes to credit, when it comes to different things once you graduate from college.
What I think has happened here in California is that we fund based upon full-time equivalent students. We fund upon the number of people in seats. So there's no incentive to be able to graduate anybody, because as long as you got the seats filled, you're fine. I think we should be funding on graduation and on performance.
In the case of the public colleges, I believe that we need to do everything we can to bring the costs down for everyone. I have a radical idea, which I would love to present to political candidates, but don't know if I'll ever get a chance to, where school might actually begin in kindergarten and end at year 14, not K through 12, but K through 14, so that every child has an opportunity to have the public, all of us, pay for what would essentially be the first 2 years of their college studies, which would really be their general education studies.
There is something fundamentally wrong with the higher education system. More and more students are coming out with debt from loans, schools are receiving less money from the government, and it's becoming a serious problem for our nation, and we'd like the presidential candidates to talk about it, help the future generation of leaders, and a happier life for all.